Come on in, honey. The lantern's lit, the veil's a little thin, and the wind's been dying to carry a few secrets your way. Welcome to Raven's Ramblings, where the shadows walk beside us and the past never stays buried, and a good spell can speak louder than a sermon. I'm Raven Nightingale, part healer, part hellraiser, keeper of the old ways and ghost stories alike. So pull up a chair and listen close. You never know what might be whispering in the dark. Hello, my lovely little crows, and welcome back to Raven's Ramblings, the podcast where we talk mainly about witchcraft, but some about life and the weird spaces kind of in between those things. And sometimes we talk about the things that people don't really know how to talk about those things. Does that make sense? Kind of, maybe. We'll see. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It is a very personal episode. It's going to be a little bit quieter, and it may even be uncomfortable for some. So, um, I guess trigger warning, uh, deaths and family, that kind of thing. No details or anything, but yeah. If that's not your bag, baby, then just switch on over to another episode. Okay. So, last Friday, my grandmother passed. She was my last grandparent. Yes, I was still young enough to have one left. I know. I probably don't. I don't. I'm old. I know I'm old. It's fine. Um, she had been declining for a while, and her whole body had been slowly shutting down, piece by piece. And by the end, it wasn't a life anymore. You know, she was cremated. There was not a funeral, so there was no gathering, no big moment where everyone wears black and stands around a grave and says goodbye. And the strange part for me, I guess, is I haven't cried. I don't I don't really feel devastated. If anything, I feel something closer to relief. And that may sound cold to some people, but tonight I want to talk about something that witches understand, I think, better than most people. Sometimes grief is quiet. Sometimes love looks like letting someone go. Yeah. So, our culture here in America and throughout most of the world has a very specific picture of what grief is supposed to look like. You're supposed to cry. You're supposed to feel shattered and heartbroken. You're supposed to be overcome with sadness. But that is not always what happens, especially when someone's been suffering for a while. When you watch someone slowly decline, something strange happens inside of you. Part of you begins that grieving process before they're even gone because you are literally watching the pieces of them disappear. Their strength, their memory, their independence, their personality. You watch that light dim a little bit more every time you see them. And it truly is like watching a candle burn down over months or years even. And when that flame finally goes out, sometimes the feeling isn't shock of, oh, how did this happen? It's more of a quiet exhale. Yeah. And that's okay. So, witches historically have always had a little bit of different relationship with death. I mean, you know that. I know that. In older traditions, death wasn't really hidden away in hospitals and funeral homes. People died at home. Um, They just did. That's why, at least in the South, the front room of a home is called the living room because that's you you did your living there. That's also where they would hold wakes and stuff. So when people died at home, family members sat with them. Um, Sometimes the village healers and cunning folk were often present when someone crossed that threshold. Death was not seen as a failure. It was seen as a passage, a crossing, just a transition from one world into another. And in many traditions, there is the idea of the veil. I've personally talked about the veil on several episodes, especially around Samhain. And the veil is the thin place between this world and whatever comes after. And we witches often walk that edge a little bit more comfortably than most people. We talk to our ancestors, we honor the dead, we recognize that life and death are not opposites. They're really not. They're partners. They're two sides of the same coin in a way. So here's the part that some people, even myself, feel guilty admitting. When someone dies, sometimes we do feel relief. And it's not a relief because we didn't love them. It is a relief because their suffering is over. The long decline has ended. They are no longer trapped in a body that has stopped cooperating with them. Because watching someone suffer can be incredibly heavy and traumatic. And when it ends, when their life is over, the weight can be lifted from those of us that were witnesses to it. Yeah. And that feeling does not make you a bad person. Not at all. It makes you human because love does not always cry. Sometimes love just exhales and sighs, and that's okay. Now, the one thing with this whole process of my grandmother that has felt a little bit strange for me was the lack of ritual because there was no funeral, no gathering, no moment where the world pauses and acknowledges a life. Now we had, our private moment with her. Most of the family came in and we had those moments in private. But you still, especially in the South, I'm telling you, in the South, it's different. You expect things, okay? So from and it's not just in the South, for most of human history, death rituals have been incredibly important. We have wakes and vigils and funerals and storytelling and food shared with the family. And, these rituals weren't really for the dead, they were for the living. They gave us a container for our grief. They gave us a moment and a place to say that goodbye and to know that that's done, and without those rituals, sometimes death can feel unfinished, like a book that's closed before you've read the last page. And that's where we as witches can step in and kind of create our own moment of remembrance. Okay? And that's okay. It does not have to be shared with the whole family or the outside world. It's just you giving yourself those moments. Okay? So if you've lost someone and never really had a moment to acknowledge it, here's a very simple ritual that you can do. It's nothing complicated. It is strictly intention and a candle because I have to have candles. I got two burning behind me over here. So take your candle, and it doesn't matter what color, your favorite color, their favorite color, whatever you have on hand. Set it somewhere quiet and place something nearby that reminds you of that person that you've lost, whether it be a photograph or an object or even just a memory in your mind that you've kind of brought to the forefront. And then light your candle. Say that person's name out loud and thank them for something that they gave you. Maybe it was a lesson, maybe it was a funny story, maybe it's just the fact that your life crossed paths with theirs. And then just sit quietly for a few minutes. You don't have to summon anything, you don't have to expect anything mystical. The magic is simply acknowledging that a life existed and then it touched yours. Now, when you're ready, blow out the candle. That's it. Simple, quiet, but meaningful. Okay? Grief itself is not a straight road, it is really more like a forest. Sometimes you wander through that forest for years, and you're just wandering around. And sometimes you barely step inside. Yeah. And sometimes, months later, something small is going to remind you of a person, and suddenly there it is, a memory, a tear, a laugh. Grief moves at its own pace, and there's no correct way or one way to experience it. Not crying doesn't mean that you didn't love someone. Feeling relief doesn't mean that you're heartless. Sometimes the greatest kindness that is being glad that someone's long struggle is over and they are not suffering anymore. I know that's what I feel. So, death is something witches tend to think about more honestly than most people. We understand cycles, we watch the seasons around us. We know that everything that lives eventually returns to the earth. But that doesn't make death meaningless. It makes life sacred. Every life is a small flame. And when the flame goes out, the warmth that it gave this world doesn't disappear. It lingers in their memory, in their stories, in the lives that they touched. Thank you for sitting with me for this quiet conversation today. If you've recently lost someone, I hope that you're being gentle with yourself. Remember, grief does not follow rules, and neither does love. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and always stay a little witchy. Bye.